Welcome to this episode of Heal Your Past, Master Your Future. My name's Tracy Malone and I'm so grateful that you're here with me today. This episode is about the sympathetic state of our nervous system in relation to polyvagal theory. This is episode 3 in the series about polyvagal theory and our nervous system. If you haven't listened to the other episodes, I strongly suggest that you do go and listen to them because this might not make as much sense as it would if you go back and understand all of the steps if you listen to the other episodes. The first episode, I help you understand polyvagal theory and the 3 stages of the nervous system: ventral vagal safety, sympathetic state stress response, and dorsal vagal. In the second episode of this series, I actually went more deeply into the ventral vagal state to help us understand that top step, the green light of the nervous system. And in this episode, we're going to go more deeply into the sympathetic state, the orange light of our nervous system. In this episode, I'd really love to help you understand the workings and how to work with your sympathetic activation. Being triggered into our sympathetic state, the body feels any kind of threat, stress, or overwhelm, and it is going to be triggered out of safety and into activation. And this is where activation is a really important word. The sympathetic state of the nervous system is an activation. It is a mobilization. It is an active response. It is asking your body, would you like to fight? Would you like to flee? What can we do here? Because we are obviously under threat. When we were first humans, we would have a physical threat in front of us. Maybe there was something coming to attack us because humans were not the dominant species back then that we are now. And so there was a literal something in front of you that was a threat to you. That's when the body's nervous system would activate into a sympathetic state. Do we fight? Do we flee? Can we fight? Or do we need to run and get out of here to maintain our survival and get us back to a place of safety? So sympathetic activation is an amazing thing for our nervous system to have. If we didn't have sympathetic activation, the chances of us being a dominant species on the planet right now is probably slim to none. Sympathetic activation is the body's ability to pump adrenaline into our system. If you're going to fight or you're going to flee, the body needs to mobilize and activate for action. And I'm going to keep saying this: activate, action, mobilization. Think of the nervous system. If you're in Australia, it's a little bit of a joke that with the traffic lights, because I say ventral vagal is green light, sympathetic state activation is orange, and the dorsal vagal state is red. In Australia, if you're coming up to the traffic lights and they've gone from green to orange, it is a little bit of a cultural norm to put your foot on the gas when that actually happens. Foot on the accelerator and go faster. So think of it like that. Think of it as this activation response need to move. When the adrenaline pumps into our body, an enormous amount of energy comes in. I used this example in the first podcast of this series. This is a great example of when you hear people coming into really stressful situations. Maybe an accident has just happened and they have walked in on it and their body mobilizes and they're able to elicit an amount of strength and do things that they cannot do at any other time. That is because their body has mobilized. The example I used in the first episode of this series is a man who's in his 60s, probably closer to 70, really bad knees, was driving past. A friend of mine had had a car accident and their car was flipped on the side, and it was flipped onto the driver's side. And what he was able to do was he was able to lift the car himself and flip it back upright so she could get out of the car. And the car later caught on fire and he literally saved her life. He would not ever on any other day be able to do that. He came across that car accident and his body mobilized and activated in distress. Adrenaline pumped into his system, so much pumped into his system, and he utilized that and he was able to do this incredible thing to help save my friend's life. Imagine now that your body is mobilizing that same sympathetic state and pathway when you get an email that you don't like, when somebody speaks to you in a way that you don't like, that maybe triggers a childhood memory. Maybe you just get another task given to you and you've already got so much on your plate. That same pathway, that same adrenaline, the same cortisol is activated in your system as it is if you're needing to do something massive like escape from a bear, fight a bear, or flip a car over. If you are unable to mobilize that energy that comes into your system, where does it go? This is a reason why when people are in traumatic and really stressful events, they go into shock, because we've gone into the sympathetic pathway. The body is being pumped with all the things it needs to fight or flee, and then it doesn't mobilize that. It doesn't get to fight or flee, and that's when the body goes into shock. It goes, what do I do with all of this stuff? On a corporate level and on an everyday home stress modern life level, we are not getting the same amount pumping into our system, but we are getting an amount pumping into our system depending on what's going on for us and how far over the edge of stress we are, how overwhelmed we get. So if our body goes into shock when it's this much, what does our body do when it's this much? What the body needs to do when it's in the sympathetic state is mobilize. I would love you to see this orange light as stress and fear with mobilization, and mobilization is the key. The stress and the fear is not the key, the mobilization is the key to this pathway. If we can mobilize what's going on in our bodies at that time, we complete a cycle. Our body mobilizes, it starts at this point. If you see a circle, I've got 2 fingers at the top of a circle right now. And if you see that initial stress response where the body goes into fight or flight as the top of that circle, what your body wants to do is it wants to start the circle and complete the circle and come back to homeostasis. My 2 fingers complete the circle, come back together again, and then your body can climb back up to ventral vagal safety. The problems occur in our nervous system and in our body when that circle starts, and it starts as soon as the body activates the sympathetic pathway. That circle starts, and the energy and the stress gets pumped into our body. And if we do not mobilize it, that is when we have issues. Mobilization is a completion of that cycle. So if you can actually recognize and bring awareness to yourself when you are entering a state of stress and you can mobilize it, you can actually lead your body to complete a cycle. And it is one of the healthiest, most positive things you can do for your body. If you're feeling really angry and ready to fight, but it's not appropriate for you to fight at that time, maybe you can touch a hand on your body and you can say to your beating heart, I know I'm feeling really stressed right now and really angry, and I'm going to meet this anger later. We're going to go for a walk or a run, or we're going to punch some bags tonight, or we're going to scream into a pillow tonight. We're going to activate this a little bit later today. There are ways that you can do that safely just after the incident, a few hours later, and it will help the body process what actually happened. If you're feeling sad and you really want to cry, that is another activation of a sympathetic pathway. The body is feeling a big emotion. It wants to start the emotion. It wants to complete the cycle and come back to homeostasis. When you are expressing emotions, more often than not, it actually takes 60 to 90 seconds for you to complete a cycle. You do not have to put aside an hour to go for a walk. You can stand and do a shaking meditation or jump on a little rebounding trampoline or go for a really swift walk around the block or something like that. You want to activate for at least 5 minutes and let your body really start to complete that cycle. The best way to know what it is that you need is to start the somatic pathway, where you'll learn how to ask your body what it needs. So as you can see, fight and flight can be really tricky if we do not have the ability to mobilize and permission to mobilize. If we do not mobilize, all of that energy that is flooded into our system compacts and compresses down into a ball and locks into our nervous system. And if you have been shutting yourself down since a young age because you were told, don't cry, don't yell, you're not allowed to have the tantrum, don't you speak back at me, don't you walk away when I'm talking to you, you will stand here and you will look at me while I yell at you, then the amount of tension you will have in your nervous system will be considerable. And that's okay. I have a considerable amount in my nervous system and I'm completely okay. There are pathways through this. I'm not telling you this to go, oh my God, I'm ruined. You're okay. You're exactly where you're meant to be. And without this pathway of dorsal vagal, because what happens when that energy gets put into a ball and popped into our nervous system then down-regulates out of sympathetic response and it down-regulates into dorsal vagal. Freeze, fawn, dissociate. It is the red light of our nervous system. It is where the system stops, shuts down and says, we are done here. We are still under threat. We have not been able to mobilize. We are in no way safe, but we can't obviously get out of here because we didn't mobilize. So we need to downregulate to the next place to try and find ourselves a little bit of peace, even if it's not safety. So when your body is activating a stress response, when it's activating the downregulation into sympathetic stress, and then when it activates and downregulates into dorsal, it is looking to find safety. It is your body's way of finding safety in the best way it knows how. Other ways that you can tell that your body is in a sympathetic state: hyperarousal, hypervigilance, hypersensitivity. Hyper means too much, over. Hypersensitivity, hyperarousal, and hypervigilance. They all mean that your sympathetic pathway, this orange light, has been activated within your nervous system. Panic attacks and anxiety are a stress response and a sympathetic state response. If you're a leader of people and you see that a team member has activated their stress response, what you can do as a safe and effective leader from a state of ventral vagal is say, would it be beneficial to you to maybe just take 5 minutes and have a little walk and glass of water? Why don't you just go outside and take a few breaths and take a beat? Why don't you just walk around the block and come back? If you do that as a leader, you will have a team that performs better and that will re-enter that building in a place of safety because you've allowed them to mobilize their stress response and fear. They see you as a safe person, a ventral vagal place of safety that they can regulate back to, because they might need to co-regulate with your nervous system back to a place of safety because maybe they didn't have that when they were younger. Maybe their parents spent all their time in stress and dorsal vagal, and so nobody was safe ever. There was no safe adult in the building. So as a leader, one of the most beneficial things that you can do is to learn how to tone your vagus nerve, how to build a space of ventral vagal safety in your nervous system, because it will invite others to do the same. Because the vagus nerve, 80% sensory fibers, that's body up communication. The vagus nerve will read the bodies of other people around it. Only 20% of the vagus nerve fibers are motor fibers, and that is the brain doing the sensing, the top-down communication. 80% of the vagus nerve are sensory fibers, which is bottom-up communication. So the bodies are reading each other no matter what the words are saying. The vagus nerve is 20% listening to the words, but it's 80% listening to your body and what state it's in. How cool is it that we've got this tool now, that you can create safety within your own body, to create safety within your team, to absolutely have the best possible workplace there is. Now, the sympathetic pathway, there are two ways of activation. So this is something that I go deeper into when I do the deep teaching modules, a course where I educate leaders and teachers and people who want to teach things about polyvagal theory in the nervous system. We look at healthy and chronic activation of the sympathetic pathways. The sympathetic pathway is our step out of dorsal vagal. We can't go from dorsal vagal, the red light, straight up to ventral vagal, the green light. Our ability to get back to ventral vagal is the strength of our sympathetic pathway step. So we actually need to have healthy activation of our sympathetic system in order to find our way back to safety as well. That is a part of our work when we're building tone in our vagus nerve. Sympathetic activation can actually serve us in our professional life and probably has been doing so for decades. It serves us with deadlines, presentations, and challenges. It's like, right, activate into a sympathetic pathway. If we can build a strong and stable pathway with sympathetic, it can actually help us in an enormous amount of ways. If we do not have a strong and sympathetic pathway, and the pathway itself, if you see the 3 steps of the nervous system like a platform, ventral vagal safety. Imagine if my vagus nerve has no tone and I try to enter safety, but I collapse through this platform because it's not big enough. And then I drop and down regulate into sympathetic state. It goes, oh, we're under stress now. We've got fight and flight. Now, if that platform is strong and thick and it's got a long and big hard step to stand on, then I will be able to handle things like deadlines, presentations, and challenges easy. If that pathway and that step is narrow and thin, then as it gets activated, what will happen is I will collapse through that and down regulate down into dorsal vagal, red light, freeze, fawn, dissociate. I am the person who kind of vagues out when things are due. I can't really make the deadline. I find it really hard to stand in front of people and do presentations. And if you challenge me, I'm probably going to collapse. You just need to give me really easy things to do. You can build a sympathetic pathway and it will serve you in the moments of deadlines, presentations, and challenges. And if you are somebody who can meet deadlines, but you don't have the ability to make the deadline up until 24 hours before it's due and you'll pull an all-nighter, that is you relying on your sympathetic pathway to get you there. So thank your sympathetic pathway now if you've ever pulled an all-nighter and got through a deadline. That's your sympathetic pathway that got you there. So it has a use and it can be very, 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 very handy. It really hinders us when we have decision fatigue, if there's too many decisions coming towards us, if there are strains on our relationship, if there are health impacts, if there is just too much cortisol pumping into our body, then we are going to collapse. And it has serious health implications on our body and our ability to feel safe, our ability to absorb nutrients, our ability to want to connect with other people, and our ability to show up and do our job each day. And there's a lot within the corporate culture and the entrepreneur culture especially, and especially the solopreneur culture, which is pushing harder. You must push harder, you must do more, you must take on more, and you just have to make it work. That is an enormous amount of pressure to carry on your sympathetic pathway. And pushing harder over a period of time will absolutely backfire on you because the body cannot sustain it for a long period of time. We were not built to stay in the sympathetic pathway for a long period of time. We were built to activate the pathway for when we need it and then return back to ventral vagal safety. We weren't built to sit on the pathway and push our bodies to depletion. A really wonderful thing that I've seen with Stephen Bartlett's podcast, The Diary of a CEO, he's talked to leaders, great leaders from all around the world, and what he's noticed is so many high achievers, they're not driven through passion and purpose. Most of them are driven through feeling not good enough. Many high achievers are driven by a sympathetic pathway. They're not achieving their high results through ventral vagal, safety, connection. They're high achievers through pushing their sympathetic pathway. This leads to burnout, health implications, anxiety, stress, and all the hyper things that we talked about before. Workplace cultures and entrepreneur and solopreneur cultures really can normalize chronic stress. It's normal to have that much stress. It's normal to drink 6 cups of coffee a day. It's really not. And your nervous system and your body does not need that many cups of coffee unless it is in a chronic state of stress. The impact that this has on team dynamics and innovation is massive. If you now understand the stress response and you understand ventral vagal safety, if you're looking at team dynamics to have connection and safety within your workplace, the only place that can happen is in ventral vagal. And if your workplace and your team is consistently in the orange light zone of sympathetic state, they do not have the ability to connect safely with other people because they're not in ventral vagal. It's not available to them in their body. And that person's body can feel it if you're not there. It feels inauthentic. Our ability to be innovative, to think differently, to come up with creative solutions only lies in ventral vagal safety. That part of the brain is not available to us when we are in our stress response sympathetic state. And if you have imposter syndrome or perfectionism, it lies directly in the overactivation of the sympathetic state and pathway. So many women cycle between sympathetic stress and dorsal shutdown because we've never felt the true safety of the world. So if you've got women in your workplace or you work with women in any capacity, you will start to notice now how they activate from sympathetic state and then they will go down regulate into dorsal shutdown because their bodies have not been taught how to find and activate their vagus nerve tone and sit in the ventral vagal safety pathway. So how do we work with and not against our sympathetic system? We really need to honor the messaging behind the activation. And we need to have techniques and tools for healthy discharge of sympathetic energy. And I've given you a couple of tips through this podcast. You need to create boundaries that protect your nervous system, and you need to be in a place, either you are a great leader who notices and can support the regulation and upregulation of nervous systems when you see them down-regulating through the steps, or if you are an employee, you find a workplace where that is available to you. You can transition between states intentionally, but in order to do that, you need the awareness of what state you are in, which is the purpose of this series of podcasts that I'm doing now on Polyvagal Theory. And the one thing to remember is that the sympathetic state requires activation, mobilization. Okay? Mobilization is the key to discharging that sympathetic energy that is built up in your body. So I'm hoping in this podcast we can take a step towards dispelling the hustle culture that is around us now and starting to work towards a culture of ventral vagal safety now that we understand nervous systems more. At the moment, the corporate world and the entrepreneurial world believes that the sympathetic state of hustle is the way to get things done. But now we understand that the brain does not have access to creativity, to innovation, and to social safe connection unless it's in ventral vagal safety. So ventral vagal safety is the place where we can truly take our businesses and our companies to amazing places, to well beyond what it is that we've ever dreamed of. Ventral vagal safety is the pathway, not sympathetic state and the hustle culture that has been drilled into us for the last few decades. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the podcast. In our next episode, it will be the final episode of this series where we're going to go deeper into the dorsal vagal state. This is freeze, fawn, dissociate, the red light of polyvagal theory. If you're ready to connect now, please do via my website. I have some amazing packages that we can do together one-on-one. I also have a course that is a really beautiful introduction course to somatic work, and it's called Release, a 6-week journey to let go of tension and trauma from your body. And over 6 weeks, you're going to gently reconnect to your body and build a set of tools so that you can have a daily practice ongoing for yourself to reconnect with your body, to build that interoception, and also build the tone in your vagus nerve. And if you're a corporate leader, I can actually come into workplaces and teach people about polyvagal theory. If you are a coach or therapist and you want to learn more about polyvagal theory, I actually have a course that I'm putting together right now which goes deeper into everything so that you can learn more about polyvagal theory and then you can teach it to others. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Heal Your Past, Master Your Future. I look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode.